So here we are in 976. My recovery didn't work. I'm trying other ways. Anyway, as to the game itself, some interesting things happened. It's hard to remember because I've been busy doing shit during them. One is the Scots are no longer the Scots. They've moved their seat to Northumbria due to a leader dies heirless, and have a pretty good leader. Being set in the Germanic areas, even though they lost Wessex, is a definite boost for them. Trying to be a real player in the game out of out of one of the Celtic areas is just impossible. Who else was interesting? The Germans pretty much have lost Flanders. They also had a leader dies heirless. Got a really crappy leader out of the mix, and they also lost Austria, and they're trying to handle their now somewhat truncated kingdom, but it's still pretty big. Over to the east, the Russians, I believe, also had death, not a leader dies heirless, and they ended up getting sort of a war god, which scares the crap out of the Poles, but they just didn't have enough cash on hand, even though they have a pretty decent leader, to take Muscovite out, so they chose not to attack in the hopes that, probably very vain, that that thing won't come after them. The Byzantines, well, they're running their tremendous administrator, and he's actually a very good leader, to try to keep their empire, to try to quell the unrest. And they've largely done that. In the home areas, they're pulling the 17 a turn again, which is sort of their maxed out position in the Greek areas. And now, last but not least, were the French, who have not quite as good a leader, but I believe they went after him. Maybe they went before. They went and added Aquitaine to their territory, and the Byzantines actually threw the Count of Aquitaine out, and he's over in Poland now. He still owns Brittany, which is what's preventing him from just conceding at this point. I'm not sure. There's no place for him to go, so it seems kind of silly to leave at this point. Alright, that's about where we are. 981, big action is, well, first thing, the Poles suffered an outbreak of heresy in Brandenburg, which, you know, they squelched, but it still loses them one of their key areas. And then the Muscovites came and stabbed their benefactors and grabbed pretty much everything that they could reach. We'll see, there might be hell to pay for this, because Poland is definitely economically better, but a 9-liter can do a lot of raiding. The Britons are beginning to improve their position. The French, they've stretched their way all the way back down to Valencia. They're still lacking Ile-de-France, but, you know, that's always been too many cards, given that the guy was a good administrator. Now he's not terribly good at that, so you may go take it. Aquitaine's still stuck where he is. Germany, struggling, no question. I mean, a bad leader like this definitely makes things harsh. And the Byzantines have gone and conquered Wallachia. They're preparing themselves to convert it. Not a great task, but the best they can manage at this point. 986, the only really big events happening. France, not real big, took Ile-de-France. They've claimed to it, and now pretty much have restored most of their empire. The only thing they're lacking over here is Brittany. And of course the territories the Germans hold. The Poles suffered a leader dies heirless card. The greatest cards in the deck. They lost all that territory they had in Muscovy. The Muscovites were unable, even, and the Poles got much weaker leader. The Muscovites were unable to really do anything. They did some raiding against Wallachia and the steppes just to try to get some cash, and then they actually did some rolling, which with their leader is really questionable, and got Muscovy up to a point. Byzantines maintaining their huge tax base and increasing stability elsewhere, but then they also did manage to get a couple of attacks in on Wallachia. Only 4 more to go and they converted it. 991. Biggest thing, I decided to withdraw the Count of Aquitaine. That makes things easier for France, there's no question. But the feeling here is, why are you even playing? He hasn't been on the board for a long time, and he had another ruler die, not heirless. If he had died heirless, there would have been a chance of switching to Brittany, which at least gives him a chance to play. My feeling with these is always, eventually, it gets boring. You know, I mean, if I were actually playing as that person, and all they're doing is adding to the amount of event cards drawn per turn without adding anything to play. So they're kind of destabilizing the game a little bit in terms of, what they're doing is ensuring that a certain cycle of cards happens every turn. Almost all of the, overall course of a whole turn, almost all of the Years of Plenty and Years of Famine come out, and almost all of the bad cards come out too. So I'd just rather not see them on the board than see them playing that way. I may replace the counter set to get rid of that icky white set. So what do we have situation-wise? The Britons grabbed Wessex. They don't have claim to it. French grabbed a claim to Valencia. Germans did nothing. They took Austria, but their leader is not good enough. Yeah, he might be. I think they got a better leader. They're not really in a position, though, to easily convert it. It's an expensive conversion at 6 things, so it's kind of tough for them. The Byzantines continued on in Wallachia. They're up 1 away from it, but they lost their very good leader and got somebody kind of crappy. They've got such oodles of money, though, that they're going to continue with this, and then they're going to go for trying to stabilize the empire. They had an epidemic this year, or this turn, or round, or whatever, and that reduced their values, and they had some unrest. So their income won't be too good next turn unless they fix that. What about the Polish and Muscovite border? This is actually where the most excitement's happening, and the only place where there's really active warfare. And what we're seeing here is, even with a really, really great leader, facing what turned out to be not such a good leader for the Poles, and of course the Byzantines are also on that border. Even with a great leader, facing an established empire with a good income is really tough. The Muscovites made an attempt to attack into Volhynia from Lithuania, which they grabbed claim to with a card. And Lithuania revolted because they failed, because the Poles were able to throw enough money into one of their cards to drop the value below 1, or below 0 actually. And so then they had to reconquer Lithuania. They used, and they have to do this just to have an income, because their only income otherwise is Muscovy itself at 2 a turn right now. Just to get an income, they had to do some raiding, so they raided Livonia and Prussia, which are now at the bottom, so they can't be raided. They also raided Wallachia. Money is more valuable to them because they can't even play cards than cards, which is kind of the opposite of the established kingdoms, which, money's valuable, there's no question. But once you have a pile of money, cards are really, really the potent thing. And most of the empires have enough money, as long as they don't get in a war, to do pretty well for themselves, as long as they don't expend all their money trying to do what they're doing. So they can sit back and rule or conquer a territory or whatever each turn, but and maintain some stability. The Muscovites are in a position, especially with this one admin, where there's not a lot they can do. Pretty much all they're good at is fighting. 996 in Empires of the Middle Ages. I managed to push out a turn today, which, I mean, these go pretty quickly. It's just I've had so many other things and been so tired. Anyway, enough of that. What happened? All right, a few exciting little things. First of all, like I said, we had the Count of Aquitaine disappear last turn. This turn, what are the big extensions? Mainly things stayed the same. The French gained claims to a lot of their territory. Oh yeah, we had a magnate show up in Granada, and that ended up neutralizing the Saracens. That's one of the kind of cool things when a magnate shows up where the raiders are. He improves the social state enough that it kind of gives a respite to the rest of the territories. The Byzantines finally, yeah, you're seeing something ugly there, aren't you? They finally ended up converting Wallachia, and that gets them up to 30 total victory points for conversions. The Poles are at 10. No one else has any. Now, that's the exciting thing. The Poles ended up holding a couple of cards. Like I said, an empire that's got cards and money can stop even a big military leader if they don't have money. Well, the Byzantines didn't. They spent all their cards either ruling or converting Wallachia. And the Muscovites said, you know, what the hell? Now that there's an Eastern Orthodox territory right next to us and a bunch of Slavic territories underneath it that are Eastern Orthodox, we'll just sweep down. And they grabbed 3 territories. Given the Byzantines' lead in the game, it might well behoove the Poles to kind of join in on this and see if they can grab something too. And that's kind of the discussion that's going on is, hey, let's just trash these guys. That's about it. So I'll wrap this turn up. Oh, leaders. The Byzantines, we saw their crappy leader. The Germans ended up with a pretty good leader. They haven't done anything with them exciting yet. They grabbed a tie in Austria and did some ruling, but and oh yeah, the Muscovites improved their leader to the point where they can kind of consolidate what they got, maybe. It depends on what the Byzantines do, but the Byzantines have such a crappy leader, they could spend their piles of gold and get whatever they like for it. But how much is this stuff really worth? It's worth the claims, 3 points of land, and they might lose it all if they get a leader dies heirless. So it might be a good idea.